All right. Well, first off, congratulations to Team Canada, the women's hockey team, for silver medal today. I know it's a lot of pressure playing for Team Canada. Everyone wants the gold, but that was a heck of a game. It's too bad it ended in heartbreaking fashion, but we're all very proud of our team and, of course, the Manitobans who are there representing us. Really exciting day for Churchill and the Port of Churchill Plus project. The federal government and us, as well as the Major Projects Office and Arctic Gateway Group, are commissioning a market sounding exercise. So this is going to go out to the private sector, talk to a bunch of potential proponents and figure out exactly what is the scale of opportunity that we have here with the Port of Churchill. We see what's happening with the United States of America, even reports today about threats to the deal that we have with the U.S. right now. So building infrastructure in northern Manitoba that'll help power the Canadian economy is super, super important. We also saw today a deal to extend the life of the Valley Mine. This is great news for Thompson, great news for the North, and great news for our whole province. And it just reinforces this idea that when we think about the future of our economy, a ton of it has to do with natural resources and being able to get the private sector engaged, and a ton of it has to do with northern Manitoba. So all in all, a significant day for our economy. We got very strong steps moving forward on Churchill. When we look across the company, or when we look across the country and we see the Major Projects Office really starting to lean into the opportunity in northern Manitoba, I think that should make us proud as Manitobans, because we're helping the whole country here. So proud to share the news there today, and happy to take questions on that and other topics too.
On the Churchill Plus project, how far along do you see the process being now, given that there's also a study that may be getting underway, I take it, on the feasibility of icebreakers and that sort of thing?
Well, that one's already underway. So that is the one we did with the Arctic Research Foundation, and they're working with the U of M. So yeah, that one's already underway, and so we've got that one, the National Marine Conservation area, and then the big news is everyone's been talking about the Major Projects Office for months now, talking about how is the federal government going to move mega projects forward. Well, we see here in Manitoba, the Major Projects Office is leaning into the Churchill opportunity, which is very, very exciting. So I think in terms of a timeline, we have these other studies, but none of them are going to hold back the process for moving forward. We'll get this report back on the market sounding in the spring. We're going to work with the federal government. The Prime Minister is very, very engaged on this, and so hopefully we'll be able to host the Prime Minister here in Manitoba and provide some great updates on what the market sounding found sometime in the spring or summer.
And is there sort of a baseline level that is needed in terms of, I know it's not a commitment, but interest, in terms of like a potash company would send this amount through the port if infrastructure is fixed up? The grain company would send X number of cars through the port?
Yeah, we want to see a base commodity that can power this infrastructure for the next generation. That might be LNG. It might be another product, but I am talking about LNG because I want Manitobans to start thinking about that. What does that mean for our province? When we were in Churchill a few weeks ago, we heard a lot of concerns and questions about the environment, a lot of concerns and questions about, okay, well, if this is good for the whole province, how is the North and Churchill specifically going to get their respective share of that? And then, of course, questions about engagement and opportunity. So there's a lot of things that need to be wrangled as we move forward in this. And I just want Manitobans to start thinking about it now. It's clear that there is private sector interest. And so I think for us to start putting our ducks in a row on the environment, partially why we did the National Marine Conservation Area study, on opportunities. That's why we're doing the market sounding now. Again, what level of public sector investment is needed to unlock private sector dollars? That's why we're doing the icebreaker study. So there's a lot of good things here. In terms of the mechanics, I think there's sort of three big buckets of potential commodities that they're looking at. You have ag and forestry kind of lumped into one bucket together. You got the critical minerals in another bucket, and then you got energy products in another bucket as well too. There already is ag using the port to some extent. We'd like to see it be much higher volumes, of course. Critical minerals also moving out of the port, but we'd like to see that at a much higher level, much more volumes. And then energy could potentially be something new and something with enough dollars and volume behind it that would actually make the port independent and sustainable for many years to come, which then all of a sudden unlocks all these other opportunities, like being a logistical point for the Arctic defense conversation that we're having, like accessing India, like accessing the European Union more generally for our exporters. So there's a lot of opportunities here. They're going to talk to about 70 private sector companies, narrow that down to a list of, say, 60 who are going to actively engage in that back and forth with the Major Projects Office. And hopefully we'll have a clear picture of the best contenders to help us build the Churchill project once this process is done.
What do you anticipate comes out of the study? Like you just mentioned the 60 companies. Do you hope that there's 5 or 10 that express interest? Like, what do you anticipate?
Well, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of interest from the energy industry and the critical minerals, as well as the ag industry. I think that we should also bear in mind the possibility of using the Port of Churchill for imports. So I think the Baffinland mine that does iron ore is going to be part of this, and could potentially, you're not saying that they're going to answer that call one way or the other, but just to illustrate that this could be a two-way opportunity to build up the Canadian economy. So for us, it's just a really exciting place to be. And what I think you'll see coming out of this is you'll see maybe a few major companies express interest in building up the Port of Churchill project, though of course, at the end of the day, if we do something like LNG, you look at the LNG Canada project, there's like a dozen or more companies that have all gone in together on this large investment. So you may actually see something like that emerge in the long run. So what the market sounding could reveal is maybe there's a couple of really large players who are interested in kind of leading the effort, and then that could unlock other companies to go in to business alongside them.
Premier Kinew, you mentioned LNG. How much Indigenous engagement, First Nation engagement is going to go on with this process, this study? We saw the pipeline in BC. There were some hiccups along the way, and so how important is it to engage First Nations if you are talking about big companies like LNG being involved in this, in investing in this?
Yeah, it's essential. We have to have Indigenous governments engaged, and so that's why we've been working closely with individual First Nations, with Grand Chiefs and provincial and territorial organizations, the Manitoba Métis Federation along the way. I think by now most leaders who are engaged in this have heard us float the idea of this being an LNG project. So I don't think that this will be a surprise. And that's not to assume that everyone's supportive of that, but just to give you some indication that we have been talking about this idea, just so people can start to identify if there are environmental concerns or if there are questions about what is this commodity going to mean in terms of dollars and cents, or for those health and safety dynamics too. These are all things that we want to prepare people to start having a conversation about. But if you're somebody who lives in Winnipeg, this is what the vast majority of people heat our homes with. If you're talking about just Manitoba generally, we already have a fairly significant amount of natural gas infrastructure in the province. Manitoba Hydro owns some of that. There's private sector players as well too. So the question as we look to Donald Trump's threats to our sovereignty and to our economy is, we're already doing business with this commodity in our province. Can we now use this to help support our broader economic goals and maybe bring some more activity to northern Manitoba at a time when many northern communities want to see increased investment? That said, there's also a lot of skepticism, I'll be clear, from Indigenous governments. So that's why we're working with the Crown Indigenous Corporation and engagement over and above that, just to make sure that we're on the right side of sharing information and letting our potential partners know what this could mean.
Premier, the idea of a market sounding study sounds to me also that you're interested in hearing skepticism from business leaders as well, like maybe hearing about why they may be skeptical. Can you sort of tell us a little bit about where those concerns would go if, you know, leading businesses tell you, well, you know, this is interesting, but we are not interested in it because, you know, we've heard these things about potash, and we've heard that, you know, cars are too heavy, there's Muskeg rail lines, like these are real concerns, right, about potash alone, and then there's these other sectors. So could you give us a sense of like where those skepticism, that kind of sentiment from business will go if they share this with you in this study?
Well, market sounding is a very standard step towards getting a private sector investment decision to happen. So the fact that we're on this trajectory shows you that there is real interest in the private sector, and I'm very, very proud that the federal government is helping to lead this process. So that's really exciting for us as a province that doesn't always get, you know, these big investment sort of conversations going. That's really exciting for Manitoba. And then when we think about the challenges with building up Churchill in the future, I think everyone's heard about these concerns for 100 years, but the science is clear. This shipping lane is going to be open in the coming decades. So the question is, if this is going to be an economic opportunity for Canada in the future, if we're engaging with Indigenous nations in the right way and we're protecting the environment and addressing climate change, how much of that future economic opportunity can we pull forward into our time now? And I think, just given the threats from Donald Trump, there's a really strong impetus for us to do so right now. And so I think it's a total winner of a project because it helps Western Canadian goods get to market. It supports our goals around Canadian freedom and independence in the Arctic. And of course, it could be a real economic driver for both Indigenous nations and also a have-not province that is looking to become a have province.
You know, the thing about it is, like, if there was a business that was very interested, and you mentioned there are some companies that you've been talking to already, there's NDAs on some of them, and, you know, at least the one that you talked about, but, like, why have they not stepped up yet to be public about it? You know, like, it sounds to me like this is a shopping around for who is interested in putting up shop in Churchill. And if that's the case, then why haven't they stepped up publicly yet? Like, if they're really excited, why do you need to do a study to get them to sound off about that? Like, why do you need to convince them that, hey, look, Churchill is worth it?
Well, I think that, we know that there are large businesses doing real due diligence right now on the Churchill opportunity. So the market sounding might also be about making sure that the federal government sees very clearly in black and white what the opportunity is here. It's very clear that we as the province are trying to seize the moment and are going to pursue this thing. We want to do that in a way that's respectful and responsible of taxpayer dollars. But at the end of the day, I think it's very clear that we need to grow our infrastructure to export Canadian resources. If you look to the West Coast, you look towards the East, there's been various challenges, and I'll leave it to those leaders to address those. But here in Manitoba, by working with Indigenous nations and trying to address environmental concerns along the way, we think that there is a gateway not only to the Arctic, but to the European Union, India, and to a brighter future for Canada.
What do you anticipate might become public when you receive this report on your desk?
Well, I guess technically it's going to belong to the Major Projects Office, so it'll be up to them and the feds in terms of what the public release is. But you will hear from us, you will hear from the Prime Minister and his team about the high-level findings of this report. I mean, for us, it's in our best interest to do so because we want to trumpet the opportunity, and part of it is about letting Manitobans know and Canadians know, but part of it is also about letting large-scale international investors know that there's a real opportunity here in northern Manitoba.
Can we talk a little bit about the military aspect that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? You know, there seems to be a lot, of business potential here, right? As you've mentioned, trade and what we could get economically. But with all the talk of Donald Trump and that relation to trade, there is a lot of talk about the Golden Dome and the military. Like, can you sort of bring up what you think of the potential of Churchill with that? Like the military aspects of this port?
Well, a logistical supply chain to the Arctic region is essential if we want to be able to defend our freedom in the north. And while Grays Bay and other projects are very exciting in the future, if something were to go down right now, Churchill is the only logistical presence we have in the north, and is the only logistical support in the region that the Canadian Armed Forces would be able to turn to. Now, we could resupply from Montreal and other Port of Vancouver by going through the Northwest Passage and other things like that. But right now, something unpredictable happened tomorrow. The way that you would support Canadian Armed Forces activity is through the rail line in Port of Churchill. We're buying submarines. Where are you going to sail them to? If they showed up tomorrow, the only place you could sail them to in the region is to the Port of Churchill. You have these northern operating hubs in the region. How do you resupply them right now? Well, I mean, going from the Port of Churchill using the Hudson Bay Rail Line is the only option today. In 10 years from now, that will probably be different. We'll probably have Grays Bay. We'll probably have other ports and things like that. But right now, when we're trying to look north, when we're trying to stay one step ahead of the administration to the south, when we're trying to access the EU and Asia, it just seems like using the existing infrastructure that we have in Churchill to layer another larger scale of infrastructure there is a smart next step so that we can unlock all these other future opportunities.
On the Thompson mine, I guess there were fears that it would get sold or it was closed, and now we have multiple companies teaming up to buy into it. What do you attribute this interest to?
Well, I think there's great miners in Thompson. You have people who know what they're doing. You have a large amount of nickel and other metals there, and you have a lot of know-how in the region. So this is an attractive proposition. When you look at commodity prices globally, there always is that super cycle that they talk about. So buying low and selling high is that age-old recipe for success in business. So I think some smart folks have put together a deal here that allows them to get in on the Thompson mining activity while nickel prices are down, and eventually when that super cycle bounces back and commodity prices go up again in the future, they'll make money off of it. The Thompson community will be able to still see their housing values and incomes maintained, and of course, as the province, having that northern hub of Thompson with vitality and jobs and work is just so important. So it's a real good news story.
Anything else? Mr. Premier, I noticed you guys removed your security at the front of the building. Any reasoning behind that decision?
So like the specific operational details are always made by the security folks who work in the civil service. But at the highest level, we set the direction that this is the people's building and we want to open it back up. When you look at the PC government during their time in office, there used to be trees all around the building and they cut them down. Do you know why they cut them down? Because when you're defending a fortress, you don't want the invading army to put their ladders against the wall and come invade the building. Why are you thinking about the voting public in Manitoba that way? This is not a fortress. This is the seat of your democracy, and you deserve to have access to it. So again, the individual decisions about the stop sign being there or, what the process is at the front door, that will always be done by the security experts that work for the public service. But since we took office, we have been trying to open the building back up and just let people know that, not only do we welcome you and we're not scared of you like the PCs were, we feel like this is such a special building that you should really know that you can come here and you should be able to voice your concerns and you should be able to protest out front. We're never going to ban protests out front. I think you know what I'm talking about when I say that. But at the same time, just come and look at the building. It's a remarkable space to inhabit. Like if they always talk about this would be like $15–16 billion to build this thing today, we would never build this today. If we were building a legislature today, it would have like an aluminum roof and metal siding, and the flooring would be linoleum. But look around, right? This place is brilliant. It's beautiful. So I want every Manitoban to be able to come here. So the individual decisions about opening it up, that's up to the experts. They make their call based on the analysis that they have. But for us as the government, this is your building. You belong here. We need to make it accessible to you. That's why we did the Christmas open house again too. It's part of that.
Do you worry about do you personally worry that, some of those things?
I love the people. I love the people of Manitoba. I go out there at Trappers Festival this morning. I come in here, I'm with you folks this afternoon. Tomorrow I'll be in a school. I don't worry about the grade 6 kids jumping me when I'm there for I Love to Read. I don't worry about, well, you journalists might jump me, but I'm not worried, So yeah, no, there are real security issues. And in particular, when you think about a staffer or a civil servant, and they're just going to work, they deserve to be safe. We always have to be serious about that. But reasonable people can look at the behavior of the previous government and know when they got into the wearing Kleenex boxes on their shoes stage of government. There was a point, clearly, I don't know when, in the pandemic or whatever, where the PCs got afraid of Manitobans. And that's not right. So again, if you're going to come down to the building, you want to yell at somebody, yell at me. Don't yell at a staffer. Don't yell at a civil servant. But again, in a society that believes in democracy, meaning government by the people, there's always going to be a balance between security and access. And what we have tried to instill with the experts who run security is the balance needs to point much more towards access rather than lockdown.
It's still not free range in here, though. You got to get escorted if you show up, or you're part of an organized tour. You can't just sort of walk around the building if you're a member of the public. And you look at the annual reports of the Ledge restoration and security, and they talk about things like a fence around Government House. So there won't be any increases to security on the grounds. We're not going to see control at the front or the back.
You know what? Maybe if we're in term 2, we'll start talking about making this a provincial mall, and we'll open the archive building, have an entry on this side, and make it really nice, like when you go to DC and stuff like that. But that's obviously after we fix healthcare and make your grocery prices more affordable. So we're working on the healthcare stuff for sure. We're working on the grocery prices for sure. After that, maybe we'll worry about a booth for the crossing guard and stuff like that out front.
I have one little Churchill question.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a cheeky question because it's a very cheeky comment.
Well, I'm being pretty cheeky right now.
Now especially, but you've made this comment, I think cheekily, but I wonder if there is anything real to it. You've said, one day you want to see rockets going out of Churchill. You've said that a couple different times.
He thinks I'm being cheeky.
Yeah.
You don't know that I actually believe that.
No, but that's what I'm asking. Do you really believe that? Do you, is there any real, we do have companies that do.
So they used to, we do. Magellan builds, there's a Manitoba space program that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
So that's
why I'm asking.
That's a little
cheeky.
cheeky.
So I'm just wondering, is there any real merit to that? Have you had any discussions with companies that may be interested in doing that one day? It would seem to be a logical site, genuinely speaking.
Well, it has been in the past, right? They have launched rockets from Churchill in the past. And I just think, again, the sea lane is going to be open in the future. If you want to make rocket fuel, you need hydrogen and oxygen. You've got a bunch of water, both in the sea and in the region. And as we continue to build up the infrastructure in Manitoba, you're going to have more electricity infrastructure, you're going to have compute infrastructure, and we'll probably launch a couple rockets in the future. But again, we're going to fix healthcare first. Don't worry. We're not putting the rockets ahead of the Victoria ER. We're doing that first.
Okay. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else want to say anything? No.
That's still all-time research by the journalist.